Welcome to the RYM Student Podcast, helping you fit God's truth into your life. Reflecting on biblical truth is vital for the life of the believer. We hope this podcast will encourage you in your walk with Jesus. The following was recorded at one of Reformed Youth Ministries conferences. The audio might not be clear, but the message is. We hope you enjoy it.
Change is counterintuitive. We all have kind of a view of what change should look like and what it is, and so we talked about this. God's holy standard. God's standard. It's holy. Be holy as I'm holy. Here we are, and we're sinners. There's a massive gap. And here's time. We go through life, and so we're going through life, and then all of a sudden there's this moment where Jesus' sacrifice means something to us, and we profess faith in him, and it's the cross that we know bridges that gap of his holiness and our sinfulness and our wretchedness and our brokenness. But this is what happens. It's almost immediately that we start to go, how am I going to grow? Grow in holiness. And it looks like this. We do this, and then we backslide with our own with sin. We cuss somebody out, or we do something that's lustful or pornography or whatever, and we backslide, and then I got to get back on the right track, and we go to church, and then you stop going to church, and then you're doing this, and this is what the Christian life looks like, right? We're trying to get closer to God, but what ends up happening here is counterintuitive. It's not what we expect. We end up with what I would call BO or SR, and we either end up at a point where we're self-righteous. We've got it all figured out. We've seen that. Most of us don't really end in that spot, but I got it figured out. I've got the Christian life kind of figured out. Or we end up with BO, which is not what you think. It's burnout. I'm done with Christianity. I can't do this. I'm exhausted because his standard doesn't. Just because it's here on the board, it just keeps getting higher, and we're just done, and we're beat up. And so the Christian faith looks like this. You know, the very thing, the cross and the resurrection, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful to remake us. It becomes smaller under this. I mean, to this point, almost nothing. And so our hearts that were so overwhelmed by God's graciousness and goodness become smaller to the point that it's almost as if we're just cold, arrogant, burnt out, done, and we look at Christian growth and we go, it's impossible. J.I. Packer said something. He said this: growth in grace is growth downward. Where do we get this? Paul. Paul is such an interesting image. We see him talk about his own struggle. I don't understand who I am. He was the guy that was a Jew of all Jews. He got converted on the road to Damascus. But as he was going through his missionary journeys, he would write about kind of his assessment of himself. And he said this: when he first kind of was writing, he said, I'm the chief sinner of the apostles. I'm the biggest sinner of the apostles. And then as he writes more, he says, I'm the chief of sinners when it comes to the saints. And then as he gets to the end of his life, he says this. He goes, I'm the chief of all sinners, not just saints or the apostles. He says that. At the very same time, he says, I've run the good race and I've fought the good fight. And so you start to get that is he okay? Is he off his rocker? Chief of sinners, and you've done well. What could he be talking about? He's demonstrating, illustrating this idea of growth and grace is downward. What he did is he grew and he saw the law exposing more and more sin. As he meditated on what David wrote maybe in Psalm 19, where he says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converts the soul. What was so beautiful about the law there? Well, the law exposed places that drove him into the arms of Jesus. Growth and grace looked like this. And what did it do? It gave him a greater sense of the cross. It grew in his life. Jesus became the controlling of his thoughts and hearts and mind. And you know what else it does? It grows us with our hearts. Our hearts grow. We become kinder. We start to look at the fruit of the Spirit and go, oh my goodness, what does it look like to be patient here? What does it look like to be long-suffering? Well, I have to go to the one who was that perfectly for me. Who, when I have sinned, has taken my sin and he was made ugly by it through the cross so that you would be made beautiful. And it's a process. It's a growth process that's so hard to get our heads around. It's counterintuitive. We look at growth many times like this, but the scriptures and the gospel show us growth this way. Downward growth. Jesus becomes the controlling factor of our hearts. The hymn writer says this: lay your deadly doings down at Jesus' feet. Rest in him, or it actually says stand in him, and him alone gloriously complete. There's no condemnation. Folks, when we think about growth and grace, grace gives us hope to face those things that you wrote down, and many more.
For more information on RYM student conferences, visit rym.org/conferences.